Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another fantastic Five Nights at Freddy's Phasorific fun day, and hope everyone's having a great Phasorific Friday today. So, welcome back to another Five Nights at Freddy's video. So, what we have on tap for today is talking about the origins of this entire franchise, Fredbear's Family Diner. And this is something that I'm very intrigued, very interested about because we have heard about Fredbear's Family Diner ever since phone calls of FNAF 2. And despite us knowing about it for over a decade, we've never actually got any locations, any appearances, nothing, which is crazy. And speaking of that, I know that Steel Wool, the company who is in charge of, the Five Nights at Freddy's games now, whether that's for better or for worse, that's a different conversation for a different day of whether they market their games or not. I know they've said ever since, releasing Security Breach, so take that as you will, that they've always been interested in making a Fredbear's Family Diner game. So maybe that's a project that's in the works. I don't know. Maybe that's what prompted this theory. That's why we're talking about Fredbear's Family Diner. But normally this is the time where I, do the chapters and I say, here's the banter section, and skip to, this time point for you to, go to the actual reaction, go to the reason why you clicked on this video, and for you not to, hear me blabber about some random bullshit. Because let's face it, that's not where you clicked on the video. But honestly, I feel like this. Oops, sorry about that echo. Thanks, phone. But glad to know that my mic's working. But no, as I was saying, that I think this banner section is important because I think because it talks about FNAF and everything. Because I think it's important to address that at the end of the day, Five Nights at Freddy's, this franchise, it's all about theories, and what I mean by that is they're fun thought experiments. Like, don't take all the messages and stuff that people say way too literal, like it's the gospel and it's the Bible. Like, oh, this person said this, so it has to be true. Like, no. Right. Because the reason why I'm saying that is, we've reacted to a bunch of theorists in the FNAF community, and I don't know about you, but the reason why I got so attached to this franchise ever since starting in 2014, especially on the lore and theory side of things, is I personally thought it was so addicting that we can have a game like FNAF 1 where if you cut FNAF 1 down to the most objective game possible, it's a game where you're playing as a night security guard at a broken down pizzeria, and the animatronics are possibly haunted by ghost kids. Like, that is the most objective level of storytelling in FNAF. But we didn't get into like the Bite of 87, the purple guy being the killer, the kids lured to the back room and killed and possibly stuffed in suits as the missing children's incident. And that was stuff we learned from like the phone call tapes and like the newspaper clippings from the hallways, and then the mysterious like Golden Freddy animatronic that would intentionally teleport into your office and then it will break your game. But the reason why I know all that up is we can play the same game, but despite that, we can all have vastly different theories and interpretations in what the actual story is. And to me, that is what is so addicting. And that's what I personally enjoyed ever since I joined the FNAF theory community, is I just think it's so addicting that we can all play the same game, get be told the same information, but we all interpret it in completely different ways. And that's why I enjoy hearing, different theorists' perspectives on their stories and their timelines, and oh, this person had their theory on Seek of the Mimic and they thought this, versus this person had their own Seek of the Mimic theory and they saw these things that are important, but the other person A, didn't talk about them at all. Like, it's very, very interesting. So I bring that all up to say that don't be so dismissive of what people say, because again, they're all fun thought experiments. They're all theories at the end of the day. That's why they're called theories, not confirmations, right? So I don't know. I just want this to be a wholesome, positive place where, we can all gather around as, one community and, share our own, personal beliefs and theories in this franchise and, keep that a very positive, wholesome place. That's why I want to keep this as. So anyway, not to, somber the mood or anything, but let's hop into this week's video.
To get firm dates for anything in Five Nights at Freddy's is like trying to pull teeth from a saber-toothed tiger. It's painful, it's probably going to go wrong, and even if you manage to get one, no one's going to think it's real. Well, in spite of all of that, I might have stumbled upon a very important date, one that before now we've had no way to figure out, but one that could begin everyone's FNAF timeline. The year that Fredbear's Family Diner opened. The start of everything. Still at its infancy. Still ostensibly an innocent company. Well, maybe innocent is a stretch, but no children have died at that point. And
yet,
to get there, we had to take information from 2 games of the franchise that are released 8 years apart. Slices.
First mention, oh wait, hold on.
The franchise.
First mention of Fredbear's Family Diner is in the Night 6 phone call of FNAF 2, where a phone guy talks about, hey, what are you doing there? The FNAF 2 location is closed down due to an investigation. And during the investigation, they're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner, Fredbear's Family Diner, not Pizzeria, which is also interesting because we've believed that Fredbear's Family Diner is connected to William Afton and Henry. That's an establishment where Fredbear's Family Diner has 2 animatronics, a yellow golden Freddy and a yellow golden Bonnie. Freddy obviously being Henry's, and then Bonnie being, well, William Afton's, right? But saying the original restaurant owner, so not William and Henry? Interesting.
That are released 8 years apart. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. One of the most useful parts about Secret of the Mimic is how readily it gives us definitive years and dates for things that happen in it. One of the clearest examples of it is that we know for a fact this game takes place in 1979. Not only was that year in the trailer, but then in Arnold's van when you roll up to Murray's Costume Manor, you can find a work order from Fazbear dated 1979.
Order number, is that a 0? Or a theta? 2175 1-800 555 55555 phone number. I do see a 79. Murray's Costume Manor. Retrieve Fazbear Entertainment assets from the premises.
9.
Hey Dakota, what's up?
Straight up just telling us when the game takes place. How many FNAF games can you think of unambiguously tell us exactly when the game takes place?
The game itself tells us? Okay, let's see. FNAF 1, no. Alright, so I'm gonna go order of releases, by the way. FNAF 1, no. We believe it could be like 1992, 1993, 1994, something along those lines. Simply because, at least my interpretation, is there was an incident at a Chuck E. Cheese establishment in real life in, I think it was Aurora, Colorado. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, here you go. Hold on. Let me pull up on the stream for you just so I can talk about it. Ba, 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 ba. Sorry about all this, but this is a live stream, so we do everything in real time. No, I want to make this bigger. There you go. Okay, so as you can see, So this, on December 14th, 1993, a 19-year-old former employee named Nathan Dunlap shot and killed 4 workers and critically injured a 5th, that's important, we'll talk about that later, during a robbery at a Chuck E. Cheese's restaurant in Aurora, Colorado. Dunlap fired following a dispute over his work hours. Okay. So, the reason I'm bringing this up is, first of all, for starters, this shouldn't be any surprise. This shouldn't be any stretch of imagination that, yeah, despite Five Nights at Freddy's being a fictional IP, a fictional franchise that doesn't exist in the real world, unfortunately, takes a lot of inspiration from the Chuck E. Cheese franchise in real life that may or may not be closed permanently. I think it's closed permanently ever since 2020, but then I hear about, other restaurants being open, so I don't know. But you get what I mean. And it's a pizzeria establishment, arcades, animatronics, like, the connection is there. And also there's like explicitly references to Chuck E. Cheese and Five Nights at Freddy's games. For instance, in one of the duffel bag electronic messages you can see in Security Breach, it has a message talking about pizza possibly being recycled and Frankensteined on to other pizza pies and given to other customers instead of being thrown out, the leftovers. That is a reference to, in real life, people believing that in Chuck E. Cheese, the leftover pizza that customers did not have for whatever reason, instead of it being thrown out, which would be the responsible thing to do, instead Frankenstein onto another pizza pie and then made a full circle and then given to somebody else. So there is actually references to Chuck E. Cheese and Five Nights at Freddy's, believe it or not. But getting past the point, going from joke to actually something that's like doing with, serious stuff like murder. But, so 1993, you can see a former employee. We know, that William Afton is connected to the franchise in some way. 4 people were killed, and the 5th one was critically injured. And the reason why I brought that up is that, hold up, I'm trying to remember. Okay, anyways. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second. But 4 people were killed, and then a 5th one was critically injured. And that first person was part of the trial to sentence him to life in prison in the court hearing. But the reason I bring all this up is that not only was there a real incident that happened at a Chuck E. Cheese establishment where people were murdered in the 90s, but also if you look at the paycheck after the Five Nights at Freddy's, as the name suggests, if you add up, because I want to say the paycheck total pay is like $1, it's like $120 and like 50 cents or something like that. Which sounds terrible pay, but I want to say in the year 1993, the minimum wage was like $3 and like 30 cents, $3.35 or something like that, which is the exact amount you would need for the 40 hours of work, which is 5 hours for each of the days and then 5 days in total. Like the minimum wage was the exact same. So there you go. But obviously, that does not count, right? But I just want to throw those connections out there. But hey, it's never been confirmed. But yeah, I've always believed, my personal headcanon is, FNAF 1's like 1993 because of that in real life Aurora, Colorado incident. FNAF 2, it does have a paycheck that's dated 1987, right? But issue with that is that, the phone tapes It welcomes you to your new summer job, but the paycheck, it's dated in like November. So 1987, but it's also dated in November, which obviously is not a summer month. Um, FNAF 3, we know it's 30 years after the original pizzeria was shut down. Um, so I think if we do the math, we can figure out when FNAF 3 took place, which would be 30 years after 1983, which was the original, because the coins, the fast coins you get in FNAF VR Help Wanted, it shows a Fredbear pizzeria that was established in 1983. So 30 years after that would be 2013. So FNAF 3. Um, but again, I feel like that's just a simple guesswork rather than actual confirmation from Scott himself, believe it or not. Believe it or not many things be confirmed in this series. And that's what makes it so hard. FNAF 4. It could be 1983. The Chomp of 83 instead of the Bite of 87. I mean, the TV screen also says the Fredbear and Friends show that was established in 1983. Sister location, that is a huge mess, and who knows when that takes place. FNAF 6. No, I can't think of anything at the present moment. Because FNAF 6 is weird. Because it's the end, because it deals with, like, Scoopers and Remnant, and, deals with, brandishing, after the deepest, darkest pit of hell. But also deals a lot of stuff in the very beginning of the timeline, like giving, like, a backstory to, Susie, who would be attached to, like, Chica, and, like, the Charlotte being cut to the puppet. It deals with like early stuff on the timeline, but the game also canonically takes place late because it's banishing William Afton to hell. FNAF 7, that game doesn't take place in a canonical sense. I refuse to believe it. Because that's just Afton's personal torment. FNAF VR games, I'm going to bundle them both. I got nothing. I got nothing. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that we know FNAF VR Help Wanted 1 and Security Breach were released around the same time. Because in the Christmas DLC of FNAF VR Help Wanted 1, we literally are taken to a screen where we literally see like the construction project of the Pizza Pletz being built in real time. So we know that the FNAF VR Help Wanted 1 and Security Breach, the Pizza Pletz, are around the same time. And FNAF 2 would have to take place after the FNAF 6 fire as well. Let's see. Into the Pit. I would say that is a game that has an exception that actually has a date confirmed because Oswald teleports back to 1985. So I think that gets an exception to the rule. Is Into the Pit. So that's one. And Secret of the Mimic. Are there any other games? FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, Sister Location, FNAF 6, Custom Night, Help Wanted Games, Into the Pit, Security Breach. Yeah. So I would say, to memory, the only ones would be FNAF Into the Pit, which would be 1985. And then FNAF 3, if you just want to do some math of 30 years after the original. And then Secret of the Mimic, of course.
Just Secret of the Mimic. And I hear you, what about FNAF 2 and its checks? There's an argument that you're going there after it's already closed down, and that's like something you find there. That's the second best. That's how dire it is. The second best option is one where you could argue that's inaccurate. Nothing else otherwise. But it doesn't just stop there. We have the tapes of David's birthday detailing 5 years of David's life, and because of those birthday tapes, we know when Fiona dies and when the Mimic starts getting introduced, at least relative to David's age. We also have this economic chart found in one of the offices that tells us about the money situation of MCM from 1965 to 1975. Unprecedented information of one of the businesses in this franchise. Using all of this, you can make a pretty compelling timeline of Murray's Costume Manor and the way it functioned. But why would that matter, right? Like, this isn't Fazbear Entertainment. We don't super need to know what Murray's Costume Manor was up to in the 1968 year. Man, it's starting to get cold.
Sorry, not Spawn.
Now, well, knowledge of what Murray's Costume Manor was up to from 1965 to 1975 is vitally important for Fazbear Entertainment. Because when we meet Murray's Costume Manor, they're already partners with Fazbear. Not just partners, this audio log is incredibly interesting.
Edwin, never forget. They're behind it. Don't trust them. Never tell them. They want to destroy you. Dad was right.
That's something that has always confused me about Edwin's dad being right and not trusting Fazbear, which I've always interpreted as Edwin's dad not trusting William Afton, right? Because we know through the other tapes that, Edwin and Henry are close. Like, Edwin is on like a nickname basis with Henry, calling him Hen, right? And, believe it or not, if you have the pick of the litter of, William Afton and Henry, Henry is the way better of a good person than the child murdering purple guy. Again, that's not a high bar to clear, but it's something. So when I hear that Edwin's dad doesn't trust, them, I've always interpreted that as not trusting William Afton, because again, who is the one that, offers, the job to be like the independent contractor for Fazbear Entertainment? William Afton. Who is the one that, offers all of these, Murray Costume Manor and employees to try to poach them and offer all these added benefits to move them away from the Costume Manor into Fazbear Entertainment? Now that the company is sinking. Afton, not Henry.
Rows of conspiracism and having his world crumble around him, Edwin correctly basically guesses that Fazbear is behind a majority of what's going on, and he mentions that Dad said not to trust them. Now, this is interesting, because Edwin Sr., his father, was the person running MCM before he died. So the way this is phrased made it seem like while Edwin Sr. was running the company, he warned Edwin Murray, his son, to not trust Fazbear Entertainment, which to me says you had to have known and or worked with them for at least some time to tell your son, who's not CEO, to not trust this company. Clearly, Edwin Sr. trusted Fazbear enough to work with them in some way. We see Fredbear's Family Diners posters all over MCM. Not to mention the several parts that MCM are using from Fazbear Entertainment. These boxes in the workshop are labeled from Fazbear. They're sharing information and technology. At least by the time of Edwin Murray. There was some sort of mutual work balance between these two companies, but Edwin Sr. drilled it into his son to not fully trust Fazbear Entertainment. We're never told why. My best guess, judging about how early this is in the timeline, is just how shrewd and ruthless of a businessman William Afton is. Edwin Murray describes the employees as his friends who would come up to his house and hang out and do parties, which tells me this is probably what was happening when Edwin Sr. was in charge. It seemed like it genuinely was a very close-knit group of employees with their employer. So knowing that in 1979 at least, William Afton is willing to...
I mean, that also makes sense because we know that if we presume that was Edwin Jr.'s Edwin Jr.'s experience when his dad, Edwin Sr., was the CEO of the costume manor and they were close and had the employees around, like in a social setting, that would make sense why Edwin Jr. would have David and, invite the employees to David's birthday party to basically give the same experience that he had when he was growing up, when Edwin Sr. was the head of the company. But now that Edwin Jr. is now the head of the company, he wants to give the same experience to David. Right? Chat. All right. Am I cooking?
Basically,
But obviously, things change when David dies. It's like, nope, no party, not happening anymore.
throw employees to their death to get some business thing finished, he probably doesn't really give a shit about his employees. So maybe it just comes down to that. Edwin Sr. saw the way William Afton was treating his employees and went like, I don't want anything to do with that. Or maybe William Afton was just always weird. To focus on what's important here though, Edwin Sr. had been working with Fazbear Entertainment long enough to know not to trust them and to warn his son to not trust them. Which means he had to have been working with Fazbear Entertainment for at least some time. Which means Fazbear Entertainment had to have existed while Edwin Sr. was running Murray's Costume Manor. So when was Edwin Sr. running Murray's Costume Manor? Well, let's look at this economic chart again. We see a company in the red, but climbing for some time, till it finally starts to get into the positive, dips right back down to the negatives, and then this massive boom in around 1973. Judging from the sheer scale of this increase, alongside how further along it is in the timeline, I'm willing to bet good money that this is the Cleanovac boom. What I mean to say is, the Cleanovac was obviously wildly successful. Not only was there billboards and commercials for it, but they built a golden statue of the Cleanovac in the middle of their showroom lobby, which, you probably would only want to do that with your best thing you've ever made. Not to mention the way Edwin talks about the Cleanovac. In that one birthday tape where he's maybe...
It's like a YouTuber where they have one video go viral and they try to do all these like bigger, bolder, grander things, trying to recreate that magic and go viral again, but it's not working. It's like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't it go viral anymore? So they're trying to recreate that magic, but nothing's working. That's why the cereal with the prank like buzzer didn't really work. Like the jester like cereal, the clothes like jacket hanger that adjusts on height based on what you need.
Beginning to make the mimic during David's birthday.
The mitocycline, no. Mycelium, not mitocycline. I don't know where that came from, but the mushroom heads who basically communicate through like radios and walkie-talkies, and it's a lot like Siri or a very early Alexa where it listens to what you say and then like programs and remembers that. But remember, this is technology in the 70s or earlier. But Siri, Alexa, and all those other technologies, they came out, like the 2010s? Really? So, again, Fazbear Entertainment and the Costume Manor, for lack of better terms, both way out of its time when it comes to technology.
We get this line from him.
Just give me a minute. I had the best idea.
Okay,
This is
well...
it. This is the one. Bigger than the Cleanovac.
That sort of manic energy tells me he made one really damn good thing that was really successful, and then everything else was like a little bit worse, and he's losing his mind about it. This success is even further backed up by the way Moon.exe talks about the prototype of it, Vacuum Pet, his greatest success and his greatest failure. In a way, it's his greatest success because it's what saved the company, but at the same time, never being able to live up to that again and obsessing over beating it is what led to his ruining of his life. Now, figuring out that this bump is the Cleanovac is incredibly important.
You're so focused on, there's a saying for it. They're so focused on the like trees right in front of you, but you're not so focused on the forest. And that probably doesn't make any sense, so let me explain. I probably got the quote once, or apologies, but it's basically this quote that it's all about the journey, not the end result, right? You're so focused on, the immediate thing that's right in front of you, but you're not focused on the long path, the long journey. Like, for instance, this, just goes to, life. Like, you know, I can, look at my workout regimen, my workout routine, something I've been doing the last few years consistently ever since 2022. And, I can look at, this picture, this is the physique that I'm, trying to get and everything. And I'm so focused on that. And, I'm not considering the, progress. I'm not considering that working out something that has to be consistent and long term. It's not something that is, going to have like immediate satisfaction. It's something that is something that's long term and is a life changing decision that you have to stick with it for many years to have any sense of progress or fulfillment.
But not for a great reason. I'll be honest. I found 3 different fan wikis saying that the Cleanovac was the first invention that Edwin made after taking over as CEO of the company. None of them have cited a source, and I can't find this anywhere in the game. If any of you guys know, let me know in the comments, because right now, the only source I can find is...
He got his first patent on a robotic vacuum cleaner when he was still a college student. Despite the bugs and high price point, it sold well enough to allow Edwin to start his business right out of school. The vacuum also funded a good life for Edwin and Fiona, who had met at school and married as soon as they graduated. Huh? The vacuum was widely popular at first. Unfortunately, the machines didn't have the longevity customers expected, and complaints began rolling. Eventually, sales fell off. Okay, okay. Where is this text coming from? Number one, and two, that is very washy, to say the least. Because I want to highlight this part in like the middle to second half chunk that says, who funded a good life for Edwin and Fiona, who had met at school and married as soon as they graduated. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Because we heard in the audio types in this game that Edwin met Fiona when Fiona was working at the costume manor. Edwin, came up to her and said like, oh, what is your name? And, Edwin said, oh, I'm, Edwin, Murray. My dad owned the, costume manor. And he basically went to Fiona asking if, she would like to do some voice work, knowing that she would be Miss Helpful. That's when they met. So it wasn't in school or anything. And if that is the case, that's when they met in school, then why would it seem like they don't know each other in that audio tape when he was asking if she'd like to do voice work then?
Is I made it the fuck up. So let me know if this is a real thing, because this is kind of the crux of part of this argument. And if this is not a real thing, oops. But
I will say, if the Cleanovac was Edwin's first invention, it would make sense why it would even have some more validity to why he hyperfixates on the Cleanovac. Not only was it highly successful and you want to repeat that success, but 2, it was also your first invention. You're going to remember your first, right? So that makes even more sense why he's so hyperfixated on, focused on it, because, hey, my first invention did, bonkers numbers. So logically, all my other inventions should do either just as good financially, sales-wise, or better, because, hey, I had my first invention, it did this, so I'm going to learn from my mistakes that I learned through my process of doing the first invention, and I'm going to take that learning experience and apply it to my second, my third, my fifth, my 10th invention, right? So it makes even more sense why he hyperfixates on it, but that's where, to me, the truth falls apart once we look at Edwin and Fiona meeting. If you had cut that part off and just simply said hyperfixates because it's his first invention, I would say, you know what? You sold me. I totally agree with that.
3 different fan wikis basically say the same thing, that this was the first thing that Edwin made after the death of his father and taking over as CEO. And we know that when Edwin Murray took over as CEO, he planned to start making some of his inventions for real and selling them. We also know from several tapes and mails and the general game that Edwin Murray is a really shitty CEO. Like, he's just bad at doing it. So with all this in mind, this chart makes a lot of sense.
I think one of the reasons, I'm trying to remember, one of the reasons why he's very bad at being a CEO is he's so focused on, invention here, patent here, creation here. And I think, doesn't Fiona even say this in one of the audio tapes, that he's so focused on like 10, 15 projects all at once, and instead of worrying about quality control and making sure, okay, let's settle down for a bit, let's do 3 products that are very, very good and get it perfect, instead of a quality versus a quantity approach.
Right, we see this company in the red slowly climbing out and out and out of bankruptcy and finally cresting into profitability, sinking back down, and then shooting up only to come crashing back down again. What this looks like to me is that Edwin Sr., a good businessman, is building this company more and more and more and finally making it profitable and starting to get comfortable, and then Edwin Sr. dies. Edwin Murray takes over, and we quickly go back down into bankruptcy, until finally, the Cleanovac is invented, their most popular product of all time, skyrocketing profits. But Edwin is also bad at inventing things, and every invention after that is either bad, hurtful, or just doesn't do anything. So between the returns and the lawsuits and not selling much of anything anymore, the profitability goes right back down to where it came from. Now I understand that was an incredibly long walk for a rather short destination. That being that I believe this graph is implying that Edwin Murray Sr. died somewhere around 1971. And if you've been working with Fazbear Entertainment for a long enough time to tell your son not to trust the company, then I believe that's more than 2 years, which tells me that Fazbear Entertainment existed at some point in the 60s, which is way earlier than any of us have been expecting. We know that Fredbear's Family Diner existed around 1983, but we all kind of assumed that it was a relatively new restaurant. Most people guessing that it existed for maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years tops, but that would have been about mid-1970s.
If you type 6-7 or any emote celebrations, you're banned. Just want to let you know that.
Not nearly 20 years into the 1960s. But this idea of Fredbear's Family Diner being this old does make sense with the logic of Secret of the Mimic the more you think about it. Near the end of Murray's Costume Manor's legacy, Edwin Murray kept reassuring himself that if he can just finish the Fazbear contract, the money from that will be more than enough to fix all of the hardships the company was facing, and once he did that, all the employees would come back and everything would go back to normal. He just had to finish the Fazbear contract, which to me sounds like a hell of a lot of money. Think about your average mom and pop restaurant. How much money do you think they make? Because, spoiler alert, not that much. I've worked in a lot of restaurants over the years. I was a waiter for nearly half of my life. And over the different restaurants I've worked at, I've learned that anything outside of a franchise barely scrapes by. These are not profitable businesses, they are sustainable ones. Ones that you can live off of and do what you love, but you're not making bank. Most restaurants survive on the margins. They make extra money on drinks to cut money on entrees. Granted, Fredbear's Family Diner had something that seemingly no other restaurant at the time would have had. This wonderful duo of characters that was magnetic and appealed to children and had plenty of people coming in. Something that working with Murray's Costume Manor would have made them the top of the line for. But do we really think that Fredbear's
Hold on, rewind that for a second.
Manor would have made them the top of the...
Okay. So this is something that I think is interesting, and I'm just going to throw it out there that I don't know if this is canon or even a theory and has since been debunked over the last few years. If it has, call me out and let me know about it. But I know in FNAF 6 days, when it was previously just William Afton and Henry. They were the two creators, two inventors of all these animatronics. Edwin, mimics, Agony, Soul Juice, Glitch Traps, VR networks. None of that existed yet. It was just two inventors. I know at one point in the FNAF 6 timeline of when those games were released, I know that a theory was that William Afton and Henry had two separate businesses, right? Two separate businesses. And spoiler alert, and it comes back to what I was saying about FNAF 1 and the incident in Aurora, Colorado with Chuck E. Cheese, and also the Chuck E. Cheese reference in the Pizza Blitz of Scooter Breach with the recycled pizza. This would be another thing that would reference Chuck E. Cheese. That just like FNAF, Chuck E. Cheese originally had two separate ownership groups that one went bankrupt and was bought out by the other and then merged into one conglomerate, one company, and that's what happened. Right? And I know at some point, again, I don't know if this is canon anymore, but I know a theory was that William Afton and Henry were two creators, two separate animatronic businesses, and one of them went bankrupt and was bought out by the other, and their two companies merged, and that's what became, Fredbear's Family Diner, Fazbear Entertainment, whatever you want to call it. And another reason why I call that out is it also possibly gives a motive to, William Afton, right? Let me explain. Why does William Afton kill? Right? Just because he's a villain in a horror franchise? He just has to be the villain just because, you need a villain, you need someone that adds tension, adds stakes, right? Or, what if, one theory out there is, what if William Afton had an animatronic business, but was going bankrupt? Henry, meanwhile, had a successful animatronic business, and then helped William Afton by buying William Afton's failing business so they can merge companies, join together in partnership. And then that's what made William Afton vengeful, because he feels like, this business is not his. He was saved, and this is Henry's business. So that made him jealous, leading to him eventually taking all that jealousy out on Henry's daughter, Charlotte. Right? I know that is one interpretation. Another interpretation is that, no, William Afton is the one who had the successful business, and Henry was the one whose business was failing and then was bought out by William Afton. And that's what made Henry work in this contractor role, a lot like Edwin, where William Afton is the owner, the CEO of the company, and Henry is this creator of animatronics that has to make what William Afton, the CEO, tells them to make. Right? So I bring all that up to say that was a theory at one point. Again, I don't know if that is even relevant anymore, but I do know that got a lot of steam, and again, it could add some motivation, some motive to why William Afton kills, right?
A line for, but do we really think that Fredbear's Family Diner could have made enough money and income to finance this Fazbear contract with Murray's Costume Manor in the matter of 4 years? Now, to be clear, Murray's Costume Manor, as far as we're aware, never received the money for the Fazbear contract. What most likely happened was a down payment with the promise of an insane sum of money if the contract was completed, and then William Afton did everything in his power to make sure the contract would never be completed. But as shrewd of a businessman as William Afton is, do you really think he would have entered this contract with no money backing it? I know the point is that the contract wouldn't get fulfilled, but if Edwin Murray somehow fulfilled it and William Afton didn't have the money to pay him, there's plenty of legal cause that Murray's Costume Manor could have owned Fredbear's Family Diner instead. And I don't think William Afton was willing to risk everything he had just to obtain MCM. But if Fredbear's Family Diner was open in the early 60s, then we're talking about a business that by the time the Fazbear contract came around, they would have been open for nearly 15 years. Surely they could have saved up enough by then to have some amount of money lying around in case Edwin somehow beat out that contract.
I will say, if Fredbear's Family Diner was around the 60s, it would add some weight to what I was saying in the very early part of this episode, that in the FNAF 2 audio tape phone call saying, we're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, but it's been closed for so long, I doubt we'll be able to get a hold of anyone. If FNAF 2 was around in 1987 and Family Diner was in the 60s, that's a near 30-year gap. So it would make sense that it's going to be very hard to contact the original restaurant owner. It's been 30 years. Maybe they're even alive, who knows?
But again, we run into the same issue here. More and more evidence piling up that Fredbear's Family Diner opened in the early 60s, but yet no firm date to place it. The earliest date we received from this game is frankly 1979, and a couple of earlier work orders for other Edwin inventions. The only 1960 date we receive in this game is the left half of the graph I previously talked about. Have we ever received an earlier date? Because if not, this theory puts us right back to where we started. Yeah, Fredbear's opened sometime around there, I don't know. Well, just because Secret of the Mimic doesn't have a date, doesn't mean we don't have one. Because we've had one. We've had one for a long time that thus far has flown pretty under the radar. One that I even forgot existed until the Dutch IT geek emailed the Freddy Fazbear Pizza podcast with a very simple question. Why has everybody forgotten about the high score from Fruity Maze?
The high score? Wait, what do you mean high score? Wait, it just occurred to me. Wait, those games, they have a score? I just remember the goal is for you to collect all the fruit in the Fruity Maze 3 separate times, and each time you get all the fruit, the game glitches out more and more until you see William Afton in, the glitchy bunny rabbit form, saying creepy things to a girl with blonde pigtails, saying, oh, your dog's not really dead, here, come follow me, and then screen just fades to black, which we presume we know what happened because it's William Afton.
Most people agree that FNAF 6, or Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, is one of the most lore-significant FNAF games in the entire franchise.
Correct.
At least as far as the Scott Games era goes.
Any era.
It's filled with the ends of stories, information about characters, how certain victims were killed, and technically the end to the first storyline of Five Nights at Freddy's.
Because not only that, but not only did it have a lot of talking, amazing, but no, the real reason why it was the first game where the series gave actual answers. Instead of just, loosely understanding how the scooper worked. No, here's a blueprint explaining how the scooper worked. Conveniently I paused on this screen because that was another thing I was going to bring up. You know how in FNAF 3, where the whole point of the game is for you to play Balloon Boys high in separate areas around the map to lure Springtrap away from you? Well, how that audio functions is through these machines right here. This is what was doing the hi and hello, Balloon Boy noise to lure Springtrap away from your office in FNAF 3. Did we need an explanation on how those worked? No, but here it is, right here. Clear as day.
And it is so littered with dense lore and information that one piece of it has kind of fallen to the wayside. Something that, on the surface of it, has no context, so it sort of blends into the background, especially because it's adjacent to something that is way more impactful. Fruity Maze tells us a lot. It shows us Susie, theoretically the first missing child incident victim, and how William Afton tricked her into a back room. Her dog presumably was hit by a car, Toy Chica from UCN implying that William did it, but then he confronts her sad face in the arcade and lets her know that her dog isn't dead. He's in fact alive, just waiting for her in a back room, and he'll lead her to it. It's this really insidious moment, and one of my favorite horror moments of all of FNAF, when the music cuts out and just the car alarm is playing. Oh, excellent work. But that's the lore you get on the third time playing this game. The way you access this cutscene in Fruity Maze is beating it 3 times and playing it 1 additional time. The game corrupting more and more every time you play it. And though all the scores of these other playthroughs are different, a lot of us have forgotten that the first game always has the exact same high score.
Really?
1960.
Okay. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this reads a lot like, the Easter egg of FNAF 1 Custom Night, where, if you type in 1987 in the custom night screen for all the characters, where you set like Frey to 1, Bonnie to 9, Chica to 8, and Foxy to 7, 1987, you get a Golden Freddy screen and it glitches and crashes your game like a nice Easter egg, but not having any lore significance. This feels like that, but you know what? I'll hear it out.
It's a weird score. You'd think it would be something rounded off like 2000 or even 1900 to make it one of the hundreds, but it's specifically 1960. When this game came out, we had no reason to believe this score meant anything. After all, the MCI, as far as we're aware, happens in 1985. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened in 83, and Fredbear's Family Diner we had no idea about. But maybe this score was a seed planted 8 years ago. After all, it's in this very same set of minigames that we see Spring Bonnie in a different rendered form for the first time. A suit that doesn't belong at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza shouldn't have been there for the MCI. It belonged in Fredbear's Family Diner. I think this score might be telling us that Fredbear's Family Diner opened up for the first time in 1960, 23 years before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Likely when William and Henry were just young hopefuls with a dream of making this fantastical animal mascot restaurant. Likely working with Murray's Costume Manor to make better suits than they could themselves. Then, as William and Henry approached their 40s, they wanted to expand, make more restaurants, be able to take less of the workload off, and make Fazbear Entertainment something grand.
Okay, so let me think about that for a second. So, if William and Henry are around in the diner in 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, the Pizza Plex, isn't that around like 2020s? Right? Isn't that around 2020s in the timeline? So if that's the case, that's 70 something years later than what their ages were in diners. So how old is like William Afton at this point? Like, yeah, I know he never dies because he always comes back, but 70 years after, Fredbear's Family Diner, like, how old are you?
And William would do anything for that. Lie, cheat, steal, ruin the business that they've been working with for so long, just so Fazbear Entertainment could buy up its assets. Now, seemingly Edwin Sr. saw right through this, and he had the business acumen to be able to continue working with Fazbear, just not trusting them with anything in particular. Edwin Murray, his son, however, was not so business savvy, ending up needing that very tantalizing offer that William had made. The rest of the timeline happens as we know it. But just to drive home the idea that Fredbear's Family Diner was open in the 60s, even as far back...
I would say a question. Was it, and I guess I'll leave this with you, chat. Was the offer by William Afton where, hey, Edwin, I'm going to own the Custom Manor. You can live in this house, in the manner that we go into in the secret, maybe confirmed, not true ending of Secret of the Mimic. You can stay in this house, be an independent contractor for me, making animatronics for Fazbear Entertainment. Was it a tantalizing offer, or was it an offer that Edwin had no choice but to accept? His Costume Manor was, as we saw in the chart, was in the red. They could not replicate the success of the Cleanovac. All of his employees were poaching him and leaving Edwin for Fazbear Entertainment, so he had nobody. Fiona is dead. David is dead. So he was left with nothing. So was it a tantalizing offer, or did he just simply take the offer because he felt like he had no choice? Because, again, his wife and his son are dead. All of his employees have poached and left him, and he's seen as traitors. And his business in the red, where he's not making money or anything. So he's literally left with nothing. So I'll leave that question with you. What do you think?
Back as 1960, think back to that Spring Bonnie poster we see all over MCM. What does it feature? A soda-roni, more pizza, fries, or anything like it? No. It features a milkshake, something this far into the franchise that's never been brought up before. And sure,
this is probably a stretch, but the only times I could think of a milkshake being used, again, it's just a huge stretch, is I know in Bonnie Bowl, in the Pizzaplex, there's like a milkshake ice cream station delivered by staff bots in Bonnie Bowl. Not only that, but if I'm not mistaken, isn't one of the staff bots dressed in an Elizabeth Afton baby suit with baby's red outfit and orange hair and pigtails? And we know baby's a fixation with ice cream.
I hear you. Milkshakes have been around since forever. It's not revolutionary that a restaurant sells a milkshake. But when you think of restaurants...
Oh, I want to look it up, actually. The term milkshake was first used in 1885 for an alcoholic whiskey and egg drink. So, eggnog? A first iteration of eggnog, I guess. But the modern ice cream version was invented in 1922 by Iver Pop Carlson at a Walgreens in Chicago. W. If that's the first time you ever seen my Chicago tattoo, there you go. And no, believe it or not, this is not why I have a Chicago tattoo. It's because the origin of milkshake. We know milkshakes are flames. Yes, that's a pun. The word milkshake appeared in print describing a sturdy, healthy alcoholic drink made with whiskey, eggs, and cream. The drink changed to a non-alcoholic treat made with milk, sweet flavors like chocolate, strawberry, vanilla syrup. I cannot read. 1900s. Hey, absolute W. Right, chat? Milkshakes, absolute W.
Restaurants promoting milkshakes front and center. What comes to mind? Because for me, my first thought is those sock hop 50s and 60s diners with the malt shake lined up right outside the window. Just like what we see on the Spring Bonnie poster, because they opened in the 60s. So that's the idea, that Fredbear's Family Diner opened in 1960. Way earlier than we'd been thinking about. The only thing that might predate this is the Fredbear's Singin' Show, but I don't even want to open that can of worms. But tell me what you think. Is this guaranteed? No, but it does seem very likely. Head to tryfume.com and use code.
All right, as we are wrapping up this video, so what do you think? Agreeing or not, whether milkshakes are great or not. Unless you're lactose intolerant, of course. But I'll say I like it. Again, I would say, it's been over a decade, so maybe this, has no weight anymore. But the FNAF 2 audio tape, which is the first mention of Fredbear's Family Diner, it would say some weight of, yeah, it's going to be hard to contact the original restaurant owners if, it was open in the 60s and FNAF 2 may or may not be open in, 1987 based on the paycheck. That's a near 30-year jump. So yeah, it probably will be pretty hard to contact the original owners from 3 decades ago. So that makes sense. And yeah, I feel like from a time perspective, we've always thought that Fredbear's Family Diner always came before the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria establishments. Again, whether you want to say FNAF 4 is the origin of the pizzeria establishments in 1983, especially with again the Faz coins that we see in FNAF VR Help 1 and 1, where it says Fazbear Pizzeria, enter Fazbear Pizzeria, and it has like the establishment EST period 1983, or if you want to say it's 1985 because that is like Into the Pit era, and FNAF 4 takes place someplace else, who knows. But I think we've always thought that Fredbear's Family Diner was before all of that, because it was a location that featured 2 animatronics, a Golden Freddy and a Golden Bonnie. But I'm not denying it. I like the theory. I like the thought experiment. Again, I would say I like all the theories that I watch. But my, pushback is this, and I don't know if this is like fair or not, but my thing is that, and this is like while I was saying, the intro that, these theories are, fun little thought experiments, and, we all have our own personal headcanons and theories and interpretations of the story and what happened, and not much is confirmed in this series ever. So the reason why I, have some pushback and some restraint on this, and not saying like, oh yeah, it's confirmed Fredbear's Family Diner is in the 60s, and here's why it's confirmed now, right? The reason I have some pushback or restraint about it is there's so many questions, there's so much uncertainty with this franchise that, there's so many things that are, to me, on the higher priority list that I want answered and want confirmed before we talk about Fredbear's Family Diner. Again, that's probably not fair, and I totally understand if that is not fair for me to say, oh, I want to get confirmation or I want to get answers to, what the heck FNAF 4 is all about, or, what is the deal with Midnight Motorist and who's the driver of Midnight Motorist, and what is, Old Man Consequences all about in Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World, right? So it's probably not fair to say, oh, well, these are very high on the priority list. Then Fredbear's Family Diner is like way down here in comparison. But no, that's all to say that I like the video, and I would say, yeah, I would like Steel Wool to market a Fredbear's Family Diner game, because again, I've known they've talked about making a Fredbear's Family Diner game since Security Breach after that game, and hey, at least would allow Steel Wool to market and tease that something was coming out, right? So we all win, I hope. But again, let me know your thoughts on what you think of this theory. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? do you have your own interpretations, your own timeline of when Fredbear 79er is? Because the timeline in this series as a whole is very complicated. When there is not a concrete answer of who is the first death in this series, and there's several different interpretations, you know the timeline gets complicated.